Welcome to the Life of Phys Podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Martin. On this episode, I have Brian Atkins, a Portland-based lifestyle and landscape photographer. Brian and I talk about the current state of the photography industry and why we just need to remember to take pictures and be a good person. Now let's get a quick word from our podcast partner and get to the show. The Life of Phys Podcast is lit by HoboLight. HoboLight is on a mission to empower creators to elevate their creativity with lighting kits made to last and built to inspire. These lights are bold, beautiful, and powerful because HoboLight believes that your lights deserve to be seen. To learn more, follow them on Instagram at HoboLite.
My name's Brian. I'm a landscape and lifestyle photographer based out of the Portland, Oregon area. Grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, about an hour south of SF. And I've been in the Portland area for 4 years. I guess, coming up on the 5th year at the end of 2024. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at now and where I'm from. Been shooting for, I think, 5 years straight now, and had a year and a half before that, and kind of took a break in between where I stepped away from photography. But I guess it's about a 6.5 year journey so far, collectively as a whole, I guess.
So an hour south of San Francisco, what area is that?
Sunnyvale is where I grew up. So it's like the Cupertino area where Apple's headquartered. Pretty much we're right next to Cupertino. I love SF. Yeah. I haven't been back in a long time. I heard it's changed. It's pretty crazy now, like Portland. I don't know. When last time I was in Portland, I didn't get a chance to go downtown to see what everybody was talking about. Yeah, I mean, you see it every day, right? So I just spent time in Milwaukee where I grew up. So I've noticed you do landscapes, kind of your thing. You got the famous Yakult Bridge. I see that. I'm a big fan of bridges.
So what got you into landscape?
I don't know. I think I just always appreciated nature, I guess, like to some degree. I think like the earliest memory I would have is, and this was probably like a defining moment, like almost like a half conscious thought, half not conscious thought, but I was probably like 12 or something, or 11, and we were on a family vacation, and we walked past like a store, and there was a print in the window, and it was some kind of coastal print because we were at like a coastal location, Southern California, maybe Hawaii or something. And for whatever reason, I was like, "Hey, Mom, like, what is that in the window? Like, I mean, I get that's a picture, but like, why is it like being advertised?" I guess is kind of what my thought was. I'm like, I'm a kid, I'm like 11, and she was like, "Oh, that's a photo print. Like somebody took that photo and they're trying to sell it." And so I think that was like a really early thought, and I was like, "Oh, okay, so you can take pictures of like the world and nature, and you can sell them for money." I guess like as an 11-year-old kid, that was like just, I don't know, that was something that was just put in my head, and for whatever reason, I was drawn into like that print, right? So it's been an interest, I guess, since I was young. We've always been on vacations. I've seen like the coast all up and down California, been to Arizona and things. Kind of traveled around a bit when I was a kid. Went to Aruba for family vacations. So I've been exposed to like a lot of nature and stuff. And Yosemite, that was one. That was like 7 years old or something, 6 years old. So I think maybe just growing up and seeing like nature in the world, and then learning that photography is a thing, I think it's just like it was like a natural interest that just, became a thing for me. And that people can go out and like take pictures of landscape just as a thing and try to make money off it, or just for fun. Yeah, it's pretty incredible when your eyes capture something and then you capture the same thing with the camera and somebody goes, "Hey, I want to buy that." It's such a weird thing to think about because, a lot of times you're out there and you just see something, you just capture a minute of time, and people fall in love with it. They really want it on their wall. And there's no greater compliment. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting concept, really. It's just like, you're really just capturing a piece of time, like a moment in reality, whether it's street photography or landscape, or even like if it's a coordinated portrait, it's like you were still there doing that, and you can look at it like 50 years from now and it can bring you back to that time and be like, dang, I remember standing right there doing whatever it was we were doing when I took the photo. And it's like, I feel like that's the thing that's kept me sucked into is like every single photo I take, like at least for me, it's timeless to some degree. You know, some you have that are favorites more than others, but like if I can be 85, 90, and like know that maybe my time's coming and somehow have a physical photo book, or if like whatever technology is doing at that point, some way to like look through everything I photographed for like the last like 70 years at that point, it would just be like nuts. And I know I would be there's like this super old man being like, you know what, I remember that day. I remember exactly what it felt like outside, waking up, driving to whatever viewpoint this was, standing there and like taking it in, then finally taking the shot and then going home and doing whatever that day. And that was like, you know, whatever, 70 years ago at that point when I was 25 and now I'm 95.
Yeah.
So
And
that's something.
you remember going around that one corner and the bear goes running across the street. You know, it's pretty cool how you can look at things and see it and just it instantly brings you back to that moment of history. That's been a pretty consistent over the guests that I've had on. Everybody, where I look at myself, I'm an artist, so I want to see my stuff hanging in people's homes. I want to see it in galleries. I want to see it in 30 or 40 years. When I'm an old man, I want to see people still appreciating what I did. And getting to that point is the battle currently.
I'm more focused on my photography than I am being an influencer, but at the same time, if you're like, I don't know, I guess getting good at something and you start to gain traction, like an online presence, like on Instagram, then you can kind of get thrusted into the world of having to be an influencer. And you don't always have to like monetize it necessarily, but like in terms of your art having influence and being like, oh, I have X amount of followers, and some guy who came across my feed just DM'd me that he loves my photos, and now he's more excited to go outside and do it more than he was before. And like, I feel like that's like where I would want to go with it. And it's like you have the influence through your art, but you're not really like an influencer in the sense that you're just doing all the social media stuff that comes with that, and like the quick like consumption. Like here's some crazy video with all these transitions, and it's just like only lives on social media, and there's not a lot of meaning and purpose behind it, or it's just like whatever photos of something random that don't have like a lot of story and meaning behind them as well. But it's, you know, people click the like button, they comment on them, they're like, oh, this is so awesome. So I feel like
Yeah,
having influence in your art is kind of the goal for me, at least.
that's a great way to explain it. Professional work with some brands. Penny Skateboards, looks like Wandered, PNY Tech, which I know you push. I see you pushing it all the time. I've heard great things. I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but is that something you see yourself doing more in the future?
Yeah, definitely. It's like what I want to do is like a pretty consistent part-time side hustle, and if not full-time one day, like we were talking about, I met Chris King, and that's just like the best thing ever. So, but if that were to ever like collapse for whatever reason, or if I just was like totally done with it, then I would hope to shoot full-time. And the focus is definitely brand work. I don't want to do weddings or portraits or whatever else. I definitely just see like photography is a profession in terms of, yeah, doing lifestyle and product centered photography for different brands, and how you can kind of tell a story with their brand and their product in like a realistic user standpoint sense, I suppose. Sometimes
How do you go about setting up your professional work? So how do you set up with these brands? And is it something where you just cold call them, or have you established with them?
it's basically a mix of both. Pretty much like a cold email, right? Cold call, essentially. Kind of the world of sending out a pitch deck and a media kit. I figured out what that was. Like, basically, I got to the point in my photography where I saw like my style and things working and like how I color grade and shoot. And I was like, I think I'm at the point where I could probably try to like turn this into, you know, something that I can make money off. And so I was like, well, how do you even like hit up brands? Because you don't just DM them on like Instagram and say, hey, I want to shoot for you guys. Like, I know there's a process to it. So I looked at other podcasts and things and kind of searched the internet, and basically just media kit, pitch deck, get the email contacts, send that out to them, tell them who you are and your idea. So I've basically just been doing that for a couple years. And then I do get a couple random inquiries. Like, I think people just find me on Instagram. PNY DM'd me through Instagram. They're like, hey, your stuff is tight. Like, we're looking for someone to do X, Y, and Z, and your feed has like a great fit and what you do. So it can kind of be a mix of both, where sometimes people can hit me up through email or through Instagram, but most of it is pitching stuff out through email to brand.
That's always the scariest step for most people, is when they realize they're at that plateau and they're like, okay, now what do I do? I need to reach out to someone. And it's just like when you start talking to people on a podcast, the nerves kick up. You check your email 52 times to see if they responded. That's super cool, man. I dig your style. I think that's how I found you on Instagram. Just the way you color grade stuff. I saw on your website you do sell presets. How's that going for you?
It's pretty inconsistent, honestly. I made them, I marketed them a little bit, and then just kind of like let the link live in my bio and live on my website. And I just finally like integrated it into my what do you call it? The iPhone like keyboard, the tech shortcut or whatever.
Yeah.
So when I make my Instagram posts, I like just type out a phrase or whatever it is, and then it pastes on my hashtags and stuff. And I finally just put in there like edited with my loam sets presets link in bio. Before I wasn't even like mentioning that on Instagram. It was just in the bio link. But I've had a little bit of business trickle in with that, not a whole lot. It was more so something I hoped would maybe take off when I launched it, and then it would just be there for people. But it does seem like the right people come across my feed on occasion, and then they check out my site and find the presets and make a little bit off it. But I'm more like into it for the educational purpose. Like if you come across my feed and if you know people sell presets and it's a thing, then it's there for you. I don't really want to like market it and just shove it in people's faces and be like, buy my presets. Like your colors are going to look better, because it kind of don't work like that. Like it varies based on what camera you use. Even like your white balance on like your computer or whatever, like your screen, how like a computer screen is set up with your saturation and things, like, because then everything on your screen is rendered differently than when you might put it on your phone. So I just kind of have them living there. People that know presets exist, I think, find them. And then, like I said, they're just in my Instagram captions now. So
that's super cool.
Yeah.
When you finally find your color grade that works for your style, and you get that feedback constantly, people are, man, I love how it looks. That's the best time to just create that presets, because as you said, it can just sit. It just sits on your website. It's a way to, potentially bring in some extra money and know that people appreciate your work enough that they want to buy your preset pack.
Yeah. I feel like it's a moral thing too. Like presets are weird. I mean, I'm sure it's like so many people make them and sell them, and there's people that are like, get this new one, it's going to be awesome. It's a one-click edit, and it's just like not how it works. So I also was like trying to do something in a professional manner in that sense, where it's like more built out, and I have like modifiers and stuff too. So if you can literally combine anything. Like you can go into one preset and just take the hue, saturation, and luminance, and then go into a different preset and take like the tone curve specifically. So I have them like totally broken out too, to where it's like kind of a true educational thing and not just like a one-click whatever like magic sauce edit that you can have.
It bothers me when I see people say it's a one-click edit, because like you said, there's so many factors to make that photo look the way it looks.
Yeah.
I bought tons of presets. I buy them. I've had them sent to me. Just I think I like to do it just to support the artist. Yeah. It's a small way that people can support, give you a little bit of support.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have a good amount. And that was like also part of the learning process too, is it's just like, it's hard to sit down and like really figure out how you want to edit something. I think it's easier to like find people's work and be like, oh, I kind of like this color style. Like, before you really have like your style actually figured out, and like kind of that epiphany moment where you're like, okay, this is how I want my photos to look. So if you check people's work out and they have presets, it's a good way to learn and then see how the tools work and then what look it gives you, and like at least have a starting point. That was kind of how it happened for me with finding my style, was like checking out different presets, and they all kind of went in a little bit of a moodier, slightly desaturated, muted kind of zone, I'd say. And then it was just like a couple different photographers had their presets, and then kind of just chipped away and learned at it on my own.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely the starting point is fantastic. It gives you at least an option to start using tone curves and everything? Because when you get started, you look at that tone curve panel and you're like, I have no idea. I know you do street walks. You do street photography walks and stuff in the wonderful place that is Portland, Oregon. How did you get it started in getting those things set up?
Like my meetup group?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, like, really, like, full story is when I started, or I guess when I came into my renaissance period is what I call it, in 2019, when I picked the camera back up after a year-long break where I basically quit. There was meetups in the Bay Area through an Instagram page that I'm not going to really shout out because I think they've kind of shipped what they do. And they were doing meetups a lot, and I went to like 2 or 3, I think, just in 2019. And for being what I would still consider new in photography, like, still didn't really know much. I just got my Sony and was like pretty committed at this point, but I was still at the same knowledge level from like when I started, basically, before I took that year-long break. But the meetups were huge because I was meeting people and I was like connecting through Instagram and stuff, and we'd follow people. You could talk to people about gear and settings. They had models there to shoot portraits and things. So I did that in the Bay Area and was like, this is tight. Like, I really like this community thing. And there were some people there that had huge followings, and you're just like talking to them, and you have like 300 people on Instagram. Like, I probably was like under 1,000 at this point. And so it was just like this really community centered thing. And I was like, I totally like this. It's a great way to learn. It's a great way to meet people and spend a Saturday afternoon. So then when I moved to Portland, obviously I'm out of the Bay Area, so I just lost that entire community. And I had made like a couple of friends too through these meets, and I was going out and shooting with them. And I didn't really have photo buddies before that. I was just going out alone, right? So when I got here, I had to figure out a way to kind of create that for myself. And that same Bay Area group on Instagram that would like do their meets, and they were like a feature page thing. They had a P&W like chapter, charter, whatever you want to call it, group, whatever, as well. They had a P&W page, and they would do meets too. And I went to one in January, right before COVID happened, basically, like right when I moved here in 2020 was in January, 2 months before COVID. And I met a couple people there, flew on like a helicopter around Seattle, and it was like a cool meet. But it was in Seattle because their group is based in Seattle, but their page is representing the P&W as a whole. So then I go back to Portland, and I'm like, cool, everyone I just met was in Seattle. They're probably just going to do Seattle-based meetups. Like, so I felt like there was like a gap, like there was a void within the Portland community, because I know there's people that are based here because I follow them on Instagram, and I know a couple of us went up there, not knowing each other, but we went up there for this meet because then I'd see people who live in this area who have it tagged in their bio that they're in Oregon, and they just went to Seattle too. And I'm like, oh, this guy that I've like been following for like 3 weeks was there. And I'm like, okay. So I knew there was demand here. And this meetup group kind of fizzled out in Seattle, partly because of COVID, but after COVID kind of calmed down, they weren't really announcing any more meets. And I think their like dynamic changed. So I just was like, all right, I'm making a group. I'm calling it Portland Shooters. It's straight, simple, to the point. I'm going to make this a feature page. And then as soon as I like have someone to help me run this, we're going to do meetups. And we started that in the fall of 2021. I think we had been running the page for like a couple months or something, or maybe most of that year. I had a buddy that I met through Instagram named Cody Keto Photography on Instagram. I brought him on because he was just seemed like a really cool dude. And I was like, hey, I want to start this group. I need someone to help moderate this page. And then I want to eventually do like these in-person meetups. And he was totally down for it. So I think that was the beginning of 2021. And we just kind of let COVID settle a little more that year. And then kept doing the features on the page. And then, yeah, in September of 2021, we did our first meet. And I think we've pretty much done them every month since then, give or take a couple in between for like the holidays maybe. And it's basically grown over 2 years, I guess now. I think we hit a meetup every single month last year with the exception of December maybe, because the holidays are just kind of, they're just kind of wild. But we've been getting constant like people showing up, 15, 20 people a meet. It's always kind of a 50-50 split between old people and new people. So like, if you think about it, that's a lot of new people that have come over the last year. And I'm just like, how is there this many photographers in Portland that are like all disconnected. So that's kind of the point of a group, is to just like have a platform and something where people can come out and hang out and meet people in their area that are into the same hobby, because there's a lot of us here, and it's more than just like who's on Instagram and who's online too, because there's some people that like just don't go on Instagram and don't post much, but they're like coming to all these meets, and it's like their last post was like 7 months ago. But they're still out there, they're still shooting photos, and they're still coming to these meetups and are part of the in-person community. So that's probably the full rant on that.
That's super cool. It is definitely a good way to meet new people and develop those close bonds where, you know, if you want to go shoot and it's not a meetup day, you have people you can just hit up and be like, hey, I'm going to shoot. What are you up to?
Yeah.
I live outside of Vancouver, probably 40 minutes. I have to try to pre-plan myself of going to Vancouver because of the time. And by the time I do make that decision, everybody else has got other plans, and I end up walking around by myself. And it's really easy to lose your drive and your inspiration and your motivation when you're walking around a city by yourself going click, you know, and that's rough. And a lot of times they do it every 3, 4, 5 months, maybe 6 months they go. It'd be really cool to have something that's in that 20 to 50 range where you're just out having fun every month. You just set up a monthly one, get together and enjoy this amazing craft that we all love.
Yeah, that's pretty much the point. It's kind of like, I think you mentioned you skate, right? Or you did at least.
I did, yeah.
Kind of like coming from skateboarding and BMX and scootering, I've done literally all of that since I was like 13. Still do most of that today, and the addition of mountain biking's in there too. But I think that really like taught me what it means to share a passion with people. And like when you go to the skate park, even if you don't know anybody, you might literally have a random guy be like, oh, sick, like after you did whatever trick down something, or like even as simple as like asking about your setup, be like, oh, dude, that board looks sweet. Like, what wheels are those? Like, what are you running, you know? And so I think when I got into photography, and like I said, I moved up here not having that meetup group available, I realized that it's like a similar thing with skating and whatnot, where we're all doing this passion, and if you're not sharing it with others, I think you're kind of like missing the mark with it to a degree, because I don't know, I just think they're like, it's the same thing. Like if you go to the skate park and you meet other people, it's the same as like passing by another photographer on the street, or like you go to a waterfall and there's a guy there photographing. If you don't say anything to each other, it's like kind of weird. Just as if you went to the skate park and you like maybe wanted to ask somebody something about like his setup or whatever, you know, like I said, but you don't talk to them. And in the Bay Area, when I went to the Golden Gate Bridge, I would like literally make a friend almost every time I went there. There would always be people there with a tripod set up doing whatever, and then we would just naturally start talking to each other. And odds are we were already following each other on Instagram. And we pull out our phones like, oh, you got Instagram? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm like so-and-so, and you type it in and you're like, wait, I think this sounds familiar, and you're like, yep, I'm following you. And they're like, wait, who are you? And then you like exchange it and you're like, dude, we've been following each other for like 2 months already, like, and we just randomly like ran into each other at the bridge today. And so when I moved here, that wasn't really happening like at waterfalls. Like it wasn't, I don't know, like if it was the Bay Area or like the mindset of people there, but at waterfalls and stuff around here, when you see other photographers, it was just like, you just pass by each other. There's no recognition. There's no like, I don't know, like that. I guess community really, again, is what it comes back to. It was just like, cool, this guy like could care less that I'm here doing the same passion. We're literally 10 feet apart at the same waterfall. And then he packs up and he leaves. And so it was like an interesting dynamic when I moved here. And it wasn't the same as when I would go out and just meet people at random. So that was like another really motivating factor too. And like, where it's just like, how can you go to the same place, have the same passion, and then not naturally connect people like with people on that? And I think I really took that in from like going to the skate park with my buddies, meeting other skaters, scooter riders, BMXers, whatever it is. Because if you're on a BMX and you go to the skate park and there's another BMX guy there, like you're saying what's up and you're being buddies, even if it's not like long term, you're gonna session that day. And that's how I kind of view it, as like going to a landscape here. There's another guy there or a couple guys there, and like we all just do our thing and leave, and nobody says anything to each other. It's like I wanted to fill that gap basically, and treated in the same respect that I kind of did with BMX and skating and scooters.
Yeah, finally somebody understands when I say it's such a weird dynamic. Like you said, I decided when I got into photography that wildlife was where I was headed because there's just so much of it close to me. And I would show up places and I'd be like, try to talk to somebody and they'd give me this side eye. Like, are you talking to me? Like, what are you doing? You know, and I was just like, well, this is really uncomfortable because I had no idea what I'm doing. I was just going to ask for some advice. And that was within the first 6 months of starting photography, which turned me into realizing that a lot of the people that we see when we're out, they have this competition mindset. If I don't talk to them, I'm superior. You know, they think they're better than everybody else. In reality, man, just be nice to people. It's super simple. That skate park analogy is it's perfect because all the places I've traveled to skateboard, even moving to Canada, I knew nobody. I'd been coming up here my whole life. My mom was from here. But I had my skateboard and I was fortunate enough to already know Kevin Harris in the Richmond Skate Ranch. I was here for 3 weeks before I had to start school. So I was at the ranch every single day, skating the mini ramp. And by the end of a session, you'd have like 2 or 3 people that you now knew. Every time you showed up, they're there and they welcome you. And that's how photography really should be. It doesn't matter how many people take the same exact photo. There could be 10, 20 of us. There's going to be 10 or 20 different perspectives of that image.
Yeah.
You know? So you want to get the gear over with? Get that question done?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because I know you love your Leicas.
Yep.
And it's the hate a couple weeks ago online was ridiculous.
Yeah. Dude, I got into it with some guy on Threads. I don't remember whose post it was or what. I'm sure it was a Leica-centered post or something, and I was going around a little bit just trolling people, like being like, hey, here's me with my Leicas, and I would post like a silly mirror selfie, and then like the picture of my actual camera. And sometimes it was like, oh, I'm like, Leicas are for rich people, this, that. Like, I would kind of quote it and be like, hey, here's me, a rich idiot with my Leicas. Like, but I'm not. Like, I'm the opposite. But some guy, like, basically commented on this back, and he was like, oh, Leicas are terrible. I had an M whatever. I think he had an M6 maybe, and he's like, it's garbage. It was, like, not made well. Oh, I have a Nikon F2 that's, like, way better, and it's a tank, and, like, it'll never break. And I'm just like, dude, like, the F2, if the light meter dies, I'm pretty sure they're basically not going to get fixed just like an M6. So your argument there is like not really up to par. And like, I don't know if people still fix the F2. I'm sure they do, but like Leica still fixes their analog cameras. If your F2 breaks and all the independent repairmen go out, like you cannot fix your Nikon film camera because like Nikon's not going to do it. So his argument was just kind of weird. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, I get your F2's cool, but I'm also just like, dude, I want a rangefinder. It's small and compact. Like, I'm glad you have fun carrying around your giant tank of an F2 that is absolutely massive. I mean, those cameras are just like a little bit of a bigger SLR. Dude, like, my Leica's tiny. It's what I want. Like, whatever, man. Like, we just choose what we want. But I got into it with this guy, and I was like, man, he is just, like, missing the entire point of, like, why we are just free to choose the cameras we want, and there is no right or wrong. And in terms of like the longevity, technically my Leica would probably outlive his, because if it does break, Leica would fix it, even if it took them 12 months, which is like kind of I think where they're at with their analog cameras. It's a really long turnaround. But I was like, dude, I can get mine fixed. Like, what if his gear snaps in half, and then it's like 20 years from now and there's no more F2 gears available to advance his shutter, or whatever, ridiculous problem could happen. It was so funny because the guy was just like so hateful towards Leicas and the M6, and I'm just like, dude, it's like, I get what you're saying, but it's like not really a reality. And like, we can just shoot what we want, and like in terms of reliability, like they're pretty even. And one's a rangefinder and one's an SLR. Like, there's not much else.
Yeah, the problem with what people don't understand is they don't actually look at the history of Leica. They just think, I see the red dot and you must be rich.
Yeah. I mean, they're expensive. all cameras are, all cameras are honestly expensive. And in the film world, it's a little different, but digital, like, dude, people are shooting $3,000 Sony bodies and no one bats an eye, and they've got a $2,000 lens on there. But I'm a rich idiot because I buy a $3,000 Leica M240, which is like 8 years old, and then a $2,000 Cinechron that's, like the current one. But in terms of the monetary exchange, like, it's the same. And it's not about like the money versus the specs. It's just like, oh, you have a Leica, so you're rich. But it's like, dude, the Leica I have costs just as much as the Sony that everybody wants and everyone applauds people for getting. Like, congratulations, you got your 87 R5 today. Oh my god, and your GMV2. Like, dude, that's awesome. But I post an 8-year-old Leica or whatever. People are just talking about Leicas, and it's like, you're a rich idiot. But it's the same monetary standpoint. Like, you can spend the same money on a Leica as you can on a newest Sony if you look at like the actual gear that people are using and some of the older models. And so then that whole argument just like falls apart.
Yeah, it's strange. Like, I went backwards. So I went from a Fujifilm X-T5 and now I went from there to an X Pro 2 because it's my favorite sensor that Fuji's ever done. And then I went back another 2 years and when I got the GFX 50R. And people are like, oh, you went so far back. And all it took for me was to shoot one photo and look at the file.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nope, I'm right where I need to be.
Yeah. Cameras, like, don't, like, how do I put it? A good camera doesn't stop being a good camera once, like, the new one comes out. Is like, that's basically the simplest way I can put it, Like, I feel like the only thing that really changes is like reliability. Like, once it gets older, like, yeah, maybe the chances of it failing are a little higher. But even then, it's like, dude, some of the electronic cameras from like the 80s are still running. And like, maybe, I mean, the technology is totally different, but like in terms of a circuit board from 1980 that's still powering a electronic shutter for, I don't know, a Nikon F3 or something, like, why would I think that my 8-year-old Leica Q is gonna, fail in another 5 years or something? And if it does, hopefully they can fix it. But just because the Q3's out now doesn't mean the 9-year-old Leica Q isn't like still making really good photos. And I like the colors off my my M240, which is an 8-year-old or 9-year-old digital rangefinder from Leica. And the colors compared to my modern Sony are so much better that, like, honestly, like, some of my presets almost are like one click now because it renders the colors differently than the Sony. And I don't have to tweak it because they're just more rich in the raw file. It's like the extra sauce is baked in. And so it's like running old cameras have benefits over new ones too in terms of cost. And I think for most people, like, reliability too. There's a lot of old cameras out there that are still being used if you like find the people that are using them, because the market and the buzz is always about the new stuff. But like, if you search through hashtags and stuff, like, there's people using like the M8, which is, I think, was out in like 06 or something, or 07 if I'm not mistaken. It was the first digital rangefinder that Leica did. And if it breaks now, like, I don't think you can really get it fixed. Like, they're just out of parts. But like, there's guys that have been shooting those like for almost 20 years now, I guess, right? Like 18 years or something, 16 years. And it's just kind of nuts to think about. And there's people who like still want one. And they're like, dude, I want an M8. And that came out 15 years ago. Whatever, It's crazy.
Yeah. I saw you did a post about how you sold your X100V. And it was kind of the files were trash. It's like a toy. It made me laugh. Like, I'm a Fuji guy. I love the company Fuji, but I've said it in a few different podcasts. I'm not brand loyal. If I was to be brand loyal, I would be shooting strictly a Leica at this point. It's not in my current budget. I did everything I've done in the last year has been trades. I've traded to move to where I'm at. That's not to say in 2 years that when the Q2 or I find a good condition Q that's not ridiculously priced, like Canada's pricing is disgusting on cameras, that I won't jump that way. And it's not because I want people to be like, oh, he's got the red dot. It's because I truly love everything the camera brand stands for.
Yeah.
Their hotels and their wallpaper is schematics of their cameras. Like, how cool is that? So you have a Leica Q?
Yeah, so I've got the Leica Q, the Q1. That was the first Leica I got. Basically, it was just, I've been on a Sony system, I guess to give you the full rundown of gear, because I don't know, I always think it's interesting people's trajectory of like what they started with and where they got to. So essentially, in Christmas of 2016, after wanting a camera for like ever, and I was working part time in college, just couldn't really afford one. But my parents finally like listened to me, and I think they understood that photography was something I would do if I had a camera, because I'd been kind of bugging them for one since I was like 13, like because I wanted to do skate photos and stuff, and they was always just like, "Oh, you're not going to use one, like you're not going to use one," and we would use our phones on occasion, like once the iPhone was out, right? But I still wanted an actual camera. And so I think after bugging them, they just finally were like, okay, I think our kid is just, he wants to do it. He needs the help. They're not like super affordable. Like we get it. And so they finally did it and hooked it up with a Nikon D5300 in Christmas of 2016. And that was basically the day I started. I think it was the 25th, or it was like the day after on the 26th. And it had an 18 to 55 kit lens. So whatever the aperture is on that, I don't remember. And then I had a 70 to 300 kit lens as well. And that was what I started with. And then I got like a 40 millimeter, I think 2.8 macro lens, like maybe within the next 6 months, as well as a wide angle, like a 16 to 25 or something weird. It was like a kit, like this macro lens came with this wide, because one of my lenses broke, and then I was going on a trip to Hawaii with my family, so I like needed to get a lens. So I had that and shot that stuff for a while, kind of bounced between those lenses, and then basically quit photography mid 2018 when I graduated school and moved back home with my family. I just wasn't stoked on the Bay Area. I'd been going to the Sonoma Coast a lot where I went to school. I forgot to mention that I went to school in Roner Park, an hour south or hour north of SF. Kind of, yeah, Sonoma State University. So I was like an hour away from the Sonoma Coast, 45 minutes away. So I was doing a lot of landscape out there. And then when I moved home, that was basically taken away. And I wasn't really trying to go to the city, and the coast, like Santa Cruz and stuff, was kind of a pain to get to. It's just there's a lot of traffic and things. So I just quit photography. And then after after a year later, I was like, dude, I miss this. Like, I need to start doing this again. And that was middle of 2019. So I think it was May of 2019, literally a year after that, after quitting. I looked at my old Nikon. I was like, this camera isn't going to do it for me, because I was doing a lot of like long exposures too. And on that camera, when you put an ND filter on, you can't see anything anymore. And a lot of DSLRs, if you put them in live view, you can see through the filter, just like any mirrorless camera. But for whatever reason, my Nikon would not do that. My friend's Canon, that was like the equivalent of mine, maybe a little better. He was like, yeah, dude, just flip your live view switch. And we were like right next to each other shooting stuff. And he was like, dude, what? Like, why do you have a black screen? I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm in live view. And he'd go on his Canon, he'd show me the same thing. And his Canon would see through it. So that was part of the reason why, too, like, I think I quit, because I was trying to do long exposures. I would just have a black screen. And I'm trying to learn. I don't know how to meter and stuff. I don't know how to focus and like recompose, because you just have a black screen. Like, it was ridiculous. I would have to focus, put it in manual, screw the filter on, shoot what I want. I was guessing exposure because I had no way to calculate it, because I'm like a beginner and I don't have the metering in the camera. So that's the long story of like, I think I was frustrated with the camera, and then just like not hyped on moving back home to the Bay. But so like I said, after that year break, I was just like, dude, I miss photography. I need to do it. I'm just going to go to San Francisco. I don't care. Like, I'm done not doing this hobby and passion. So I just sold that Nikon stuff. I bought the Sony A7R III, the 24 to 70 2.8 GM, the 85 1.4 GM, and the 90 2.8 macro. That's what I started with. And then I just started going to San Francisco every single weekend. And since I bought that Sony, I have never put the camera back down, and I've only been doing it more. And then over the last couple of years, I got the 70 to 200 2.8 GM, 16 to 35 2.8 GM, and then filled in the primes with the 24, 35, and the 50 G Masters as well from Sony, and I got the 1.2. So I ended up with all this Sony stuff, and I also won an A7C for free in an Instagram contest, I think at the start of 2021. So now I had a second body, and it was basically my A7R III, but with like half the megapixels. And it was this little compact A7C. So that was my setup for like the longest time. I learned everything on that and was like absolutely obsessed with it. And then last year I started shopping for Leicas, like January 2023. Just like sold, I think I sold a lens maybe, and got the Leica Q. And then that kind of set me off on this Leica path when I've sold like half that Sony stuff I just named to get like two more Leicas and two lenses. So that's the long version.
Nice. So that's what I'm starting to see is once you shoot Leica, the color profile that it produces, the depth of the images, it's hard to really shoot anything else. I know I've seen that you leave the Sony in the bag most of the time now.
Yep. Well, yeah, I pretty much leave that in there. All I've got left out of all that stuff I just spouted off is my R3, that 24-70, the 51.2, and then the 70-200. And like I kind of went like crazy and got the excess stuff just because I could, but I would use it all. And then I had that free body, like I said, the A7C. So then I had like multiple bags, and I was like, do I want primes a day, zooms, and things were just packed into different bags for convenience. So I've watered it down to just what I need for like my commercial work, or if I'm doing like a trip, then I would want the Sony and the telephoto, and I'd pack one Leica. But otherwise, I'm basically taking out my M240 with a 35 Summicron, so a digital rangefinder setup, and then I'm taking out my M6 for film with a 35 2.4 Summary, and I just shoot those side by side, and I'm just like film rangefinder, digital rangefinder right next to each other, same focal length. One's at f2, one's at f2.4, so they're basically the same lens. They have the same character, probably, I'd say. Like, they're both really sharp. There's not like, they're pretty clinical as far as like Leica lenses go. And then the Q just basically lives in a really tiny like sling bag, and I'll just take it out by itself as like a single camera solution if I'm not trying to take more than just one camera out for the day. And that's been the go-to now for, I guess, since April of last year. And like I don't miss any of that Sony stuff like at all. And I feel like it's kind of one of those examples where gear doesn't matter and it does matter. And it doesn't really matter about like the specs unless you like need certain benchmarks for what you do, like a certain frame rate for video, or if you need video, or if you don't need video at all, or if you need certain megapixels like cropping or something like that. But as far as shooting like the R3 and then going to a 9-year-old rangefinder and film and 8-year-old Q or 7-year-old Q, however old it is, and cutting the megapixels in half and losing a ton of dynamic range, like it hasn't held me back and it hasn't impacted my photos like in a negative manner, really, like at all. Like it's a pretty negligible difference between like the high end stuff and this, quote unquote, like old tech. Like you have to be a little more careful when you expose for your highlights, but that's probably about it. The colors still look good, and the high end Leica glass is still like super sharp on these old sensors, and being a little rangefinder manual focus lens, it's crazy sharp, and I don't really think it looks a whole lot less soft or sharp than like my high end Sony stuff, And so it's kind of just like, do I need like a wider lens? Maybe. So I'll go grab my Sony and my 51.2 and shoot like some portraits on the rare occasion. But otherwise, like I feel like I get the same image quality from like two 9-year-old Leicas and a 40-year-old film camera. That's how I feel about the Sony. Like I said, I was lugging all that stuff around, but I think the mindset changed too. Like when I got that Sony kit, I kind of wanted to be that photographer that was prepared for anything and everything, and to always be able to get like the most clinically perfect photo. And so that mindset is not really, what I'm focused on. Now I just want to be lightweight and like, I don't know, still almost as versatile, but just lightweight so that I can actually focus on taking photos more and not playing with gear, like switching a lens and like maybe missing shots. Long exposures and things is a little different, and I was shooting a lot of like waterfalls and long exposure, so that was partially why I'd always lug a lot of stuff around. But then even then I stopped doing that, and it was like the landscape and lifestyle thing took over, and I'd be like, oh, I need to switch like to my big telephoto because I want to zoom in on this thing over here, and then have like this compression thing because it's gonna help tell the story a little better as an in-between moment. But now I just like make do with a 35 lens, and I'm like, dude, maybe I'll just crop and post and get it to like the equivalent of like 70 millimeters reach, but just by cropping, and it's like effectively it kind of does the same thing. It's just like work smarter, not harder, I guess, right?
Yep. And it's just so much easier to walk the street and not lift this camera with this big piece of glass on the front that instantly draws everybody's attention. You know, with your Q or with the Ricoh GR3X, they're so small that you can capture images close to people, and 90% of the time they don't even notice.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of, I transitioned big time from, I was strictly doing landscape, the occasional architecture type shot, to I just want to shoot street. I enjoy it. I still enjoy landscape.
That's a true statement. I feel like people who shoot like sunrise and sunset, it's like you're pigeonholing yourself into, like, I don't know, how do I put it? If you like focus on only sunrise and sunset, you're like, I don't know how to word this. Yeah, if you focus on sunrise and sunset, it's like you're excluding everything else that goes on in the middle of the day and the experiences you can get going out and shooting it. Even if like it's a bright sunny day, like I understand that, like no cloud in the sky, it can get a little gnarly. And like even sometimes my photos, I'm like, dude, yeah, that was just like gnarly lighting. But you know, if you put a polarizer on, like usually it'll work out. But like there's more to photography than just sunrise and sunset, especially with like landscapes and especially like the sense of realism. And this is just my probably particular style and opinion, but if you're like only shooting sunsets, and I feel like that gives your portfolio this unrealistic expectation of what these landscapes actually are and naturally look like, because you're only capturing them in like a certain condition. Whereas I might have a sunset at Cannon Beach, I might have a gloomy day at Cannon Beach, and I might have a bright midday, no cloud in the sky at Cannon Beach. And now I've got a full representation of like what this place actually is. And I also don't feel limited by like, oh, I can't go shoot today because like the sunset's not going to go off. It's like, well, why would you not go out inside and like at least just enjoy your hobby? Like even if it's not what you personally like and you want those dynamic sunsets, it's like, why would you almost like gatekeep yourself from like going out and doing something you love? You know, like
exactly.
I don't know. It seems kind of counterintuitive.
I like the light right after sunrise, you know, and I have a couple really nice sunrise photos where it lit up the whole harbor, and I was like, you know what, that's sick. But that is definitely isn't where I want to be. I don't want to be in that small circle. You know, I'd rather just shoot my camera. And you have to learn, because a lot of people are going to take jobs where they're shooting portraits or they're shooting weddings in harsh lighting. And if you don't have the practice, harsh lighting will take you out.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is like, yeah, that's where I was going with that. If you only do things at sunrise, sunset, like if you're just doing it for a hobby, then like whatever. Like whatever situation you find yourself in outside of that and you don't know how to do stuff, then it's like, sure, you'll figure it out. But if like, what if you do get paid by somebody or you try to do this professionally and then that sunset doesn't actually work out? And now you're like, yo, my money is on the line for this job, but now I'm struggling to like get my camera set up properly, or like, maybe you don't own an ND filter and you have your fancy 51.2 Sony and you like need to shoot these portraits for like this lifestyle shoot or whatever you've got, right? And now you're like not prepared because all you do is go out at sunset and now it's not working or whatever it might be. And there's guys that I've listened to on podcasts and they say that stuff too. They're like, dude, we went to this job and we had this vision and like, you know what, the weather was entirely opposite. And so they were like, well, that's okay. We're versatile and we can shift and we can go do our job. But like, I feel like, yeah, like you said, if you don't have the experience, like in these other conditions, it's like, it's weird to think about because it doesn't apply to me. But like, yeah, if you are a sunset guy, like, what are you going to do when it's raining and you had like a vision and maybe you're on a vacation or something that you won't go to and maybe you can't go back for a long time. Or if you were trying to get paid by somebody for a portrait or some sort of wedding or brand shoot, whatever it might be, it's like, yeah, you've got to learn to just shoot in every condition. And that, I feel like, at least for me, again, I don't know, everyone can do what they want, but I think it pays off to be versatile and not kind of pigeonhole yourself into one condition for your body of work.
For sure. You need to be well-rounded. You need to be able to adapt on the fly, you know, and you can put it in skateboard terms. You hop on to do a feeble, but you miss and you're in a 50-50. You have to learn how to balance and adjust your body to hold that without killing yourself. Because there's nothing worse than slamming on a rail.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got any projects coming up?
No, man, I'm not really like a project photographer. It's kind of funny. Like the brand stuff, yes, but I don't really have anything on the horizon. Like I said, it's kind of inconsistent, a part-time thing that I do.
Yeah.
But in terms of like personal work, man, like I don't do projects. I just I just pick where I want to go, whatever Saturday, Sunday, Friday, and I just go shoot what I shoot. I know some people have stuff like really thought out, and it's like I'm working on a black and white project or like whatever, some kind of street photography project where I'm trying to find these, scenes or something. I just go shoot whatever I want whenever I feel like. Then the brand stuff just comes in if someone hits me up or if I feel like, pitching stuff out. The video things that I've been doing are a little more thought, whatever, there's more of a thought process there. I don't know if you saw the 2 reels I did where I had like a narrated story kind of, it was like a 3-minute thing. And it's just like kind of narrating our adventure out to the Oregon coast and I guess the South Washington coast.
Nice.
So BTS during the day and then piece that together and then narrate some kind of story, kind of just narrating what we're doing. But I try to put a little bit of not really a question, but some kind of a concept that might make you like think about something a little bit. So those are more broken out and have some planning about what I might want to do. But yeah, other than that, not really any projects, man. Just living every day and shooting what I want, just whatever comes to mind. It's kind of the way to do it, I think. So
I didn't realize how many people like strictly focus on when the light's going to be the best. Because I was on a podcast and they asked me, they said, "What's your process?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I don't have a process. It's hard enough for me to pick a place to go.
Yeah.
And then I just walk and I shoot what I see. So if I see something that catches my eye, I capture it. And 90% of the time I don't even bother looking at it. I'm like, okay, cool. And I move on.
Yep, that's what I do.
I come home with 20. I had a weekend a couple weeks ago. I came home with 36 photos and I was like, man, that's going to take me 2 weeks to edit because it takes me that long to actually go through that many photos because I don't spray and pray. I'm very, very picky about what I want to capture. And yeah, I don't make plans, man. I find like if I just go and roam, that's when I find the stuff that's going to speak to me. Yep. Whether it's dumpsters in an alley, whether it's spiral staircases, it's so much easier for me to just capture the moment than it is to capture, something planned out because I'm going to show up at the wrong time. I told myself 9, I'm going to be there at 10:30 and then wonder why the light's bad. It just doesn't make sense. So I think that's pretty slick. I like the fact that you shoot the same way. I'm actually looking forward to coming down. Hopefully going to start making regular appearances back down in Portland. November was the first time I went back in 23 years. So it was a long hiatus. But I definitely want to get together and go do some shoots.
Yeah, definitely, man. I can try to do a meetup too. If you give me like enough of a heads up, we have the overlap we usually do them Saturdays. So if there's enough of like an overlap and a heads up, I can try to schedule one too when you're in town.
Oh, that'd be sick. I'd love to meet all the locals. And same, if you ever make it up here, man, let me know. That's what this is all about to me, is just build a community of people that actually want to work together or actually want to be around each other, shoot photos, and just have a freaking good time.
Yeah, that's the whole point, man. Like such a like gatekeepy hobby, honestly. And I mean, like we talked about today, I don't know if we touched on the online part a whole lot, obviously, with like Instagram. Like you said with the in-person stuff, you show up and you see another photographer and like they just don't acknowledge you, and it's just like, what? Like it's just so opposite from us going to skate parks and things. So yeah, man.
I want the photography group to be like the skate van, the tour van, right? Just a whole bunch of people that are there to have a blast and just shred, but the tool is different. It's not a skateboard, it's a camera. but everybody's getting along. You're having a good time. That's what I envisioned when I started thinking about how to put things together. Now that you mentioned the wonderful gatekeepers of photography, why don't you let me know what you think of gatekeepers?
I think it's just like not the way to go about photography on like an online platform, basically, you know, mostly pertaining to Instagram. But and I don't even know, like I don't have names or anything, and I wouldn't call anyone out on my podcast. But what I've seen is that on Instagram specifically, there's kind of a circle of people who I call them clout daddies. That is my term, clout daddy.
Hashtag clout daddy.
People that are, and it's not everyone, right? And again, this is a generalization, and it's no hate on anyone, but I see a lot of people that are mostly always huge followings, anywhere between maybe 80,000 to like whatever 500 or a million, probably more so in like the 100K to like, you know, plus range. They all kind of follow each other. They all comment on each other's work. And then when you look at who they're following, it's not really like smaller photographers. It's all the big guys, and they're just in their own kind of circle. And they're all commenting on each other's stuff and responding to stuff. And sometimes they may not even respond to people who aren't like the other big famous guys on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And then they're also the ones that will be traveling together. They'll share things that they've like went on some trip, and it's like person X, Y, and Z were all in Iceland together. And then next thing you know, they're all in Spain or something crazy. And it's like, what about all the other people in between that they run into? Like, did they not see anyone else? Like, or do they not engage with them? Like, I don't know. It's like a weird thing. And then sometimes I feel like they don't share a lot about like how they do what they do. They don't really share how they're getting the brand work they're doing. They don't really share how they're just monetizing their Instagram if they're more of like an influencer photographer. And you can try to ask them questions, and a lot of the time it won't get read because probably they just have a bunch of DMs, but I think other times too, it's like they also don't open up. I've DM'd some people, and sometimes they kind of just don't really open up or offer like a lot of advice. And then the flip side of this too is some of these people will be on like some of the podcasts that are photography centered out there, and they'll say things like, I just love photography and meeting other photographers, and if you're in the city that I am, or if you're going to travel here, oh my God, DM me. Like, totally, you know, like, I just want to connect with everyone. And I've, like, reached out to some of these people who are in the PNW, and then I don't get an answer. And it's probably just because they didn't read it, but then there's others who, like, maybe do read it, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm really busy, like, I can't, like, whatever. And it's just, like, I feel like they kind of preach something, but they don't necessarily follow up. And again, this is just generalizing. I'm not attacking anyone. But at least the online piece, for sure, like, they're all kind of in their own space intermingling. And I can just tell you right now, if I blew up overnight, dude, I would not unfollow people. I would not, like, I just wouldn't change who I am as like a photographer in the Instagram online community. Like, I would just be the same person. I'd approach Instagram the same way.
I feel like some of these bigger people, they're afraid that these young, hungry people are going to take their thunder. So they just gatekeep it right at the message. But then there's big guys, you know, Mr. Peter McKinnon, fantastic guy. Could you imagine what his inbox would be like?
Yeah, it's probably nuts.
You'd have to hire somebody just to read your messages. You know,
there's one story too about this, which it's kind of the weird online tendency everyone's getting at with, like, when you blow up. And I'm not going to call them out, obviously, and maybe they'll listen to this, who knows, probably not. But essentially, somebody local-ish to the PNW, like, we're not in Portland, but we're in the, you know, the overall PNW. I found their feed, I followed them, they make great work, I'm commenting, I'm showing up, I'm supporting, right, and, like, just doing what you do on Instagram. And I think I DM'd them a little bit, like, responded to a story, asked them about, like, gear. I think they had a new lens, or it was like a zoom, and I was like, oh, what is that telephoto? Like, I'm kind of thinking about upgrading mine. Is that the 2.8 version or something like that? And it was like, oh, it's like the F4, and I'm like, oh, cool, that's what I have. Like, so I was like, you know, just interacting with them on Instagram as usual. And obviously they don't owe you a follow back or anything, but I'm showing up, I'm liking their stuff, I'm commenting, I'm DMing them, and we have similar bodies of work. We're getting landscapes in the PNW. We clearly have the same, like, interest, right? And then eventually this person follows me back. And I'm pretty sure we were both at like the same following count, maybe like 5K or something, 7K. And then they were commenting on my stuff, and it's just like now it's a mutual thing. And obviously, I guess the energy I was putting into supporting them, I guess they were just like, okay, this guy's been showing up. Who is he? I assume they must have checked my feed, again, and was like, oh yeah, this guy is tight, and he's like posting all the time, like whatever wanted to them follow me back, right? But at this point, it's like you've got an established networking connection, right? That's how I view Instagram. Is if one person's showing up, and then you follow them back, and now you're showing up for each other, like you have established an actual community connection through this online platform. And eventually, what happened is this person blew up. They have like whatever 20,000, 50,000, something or other. Like they took off, and I realized that they were now no longer following me. And I think even when I was like commenting on their stuff, they may have not been responding to my comments as much as like they were previously. I can't remember if that was how it was, but they definitely unfollowed me. And I don't know if there really is like a proven glitch or something in Instagram where people can just like not be following one another at some point. Because I know sometimes I feel like I'm just like, I thought I was following someone and I wasn't. I don't know. But coincidentally, it just seemed really weird that this person that I established this, online acquaintance with blew up, and now they were unfollowing me. And all the people that they're following and engaging with are the people kind of in this circle that I described earlier. And so it was just like a really weird like coincidence. And I was like, I'm not gonna like say they're doing something, but like this is just like it just doesn't seem like things added up, It's not like 1+1=2 here. And like why is it happening once they blew up? Like I don't know if there was something on the back end that just went haywire. They haven't followed me back. So, you just got to use your best, whatever, judgment and guess on that. But that was kind of a weird example that personally happened to me with like this weird following people being influencers, like blowing up kind of thing. And I was like, this person seems like they kind of changed how we interacted. I mean, they did change how we interacted online. I don't know the real reason, but I have to take my best educated guess. And it was pretty weird, like honestly, because I'm just not like that. Like I said, if I blew up, I'm gonna be the same dude I am, follow the same people, and I'll probably still be following guys who have 1,000 followers. If I had like 250K, right? Like, who cares? Like,
yeah,
I follow people for their work.
I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram. It's super weird. I call it the revolving followers. My account at one point had a ton of followers, and I don't know what's happened. I guess I haven't put the effort into it like I used to. Now I think I'm down to, I have 500, and I'm like, at least maybe it's 500 people that want to interact with me. It's weird, but Instagram truly it's a full-time job. If you want to get noticed, if you want to build a following, build a platform, you've got to be on it full time. You've got to build, you got to comment, you got to like, you got to, DM, just like you said. And I really don't have the patience. That's why I like Threads so much, because it's kind of like a Twitter version of for photos. The photo and a quick caption, and away I go. But I plan to put some more effort in. I wish there was a way to go through the people that have interacted with you on Instagram, and then you can look at the others and see, even if they're active, right? You get rid of the accounts that aren't there for you, but in one swoop, instead of their limitation where you can do, now with Threads, you can do like 20 and then they lock you out for 24 hours. It's like the weirdest thing, because there's some people that I follow back from, when I was doing more, say, fishing type stuff, which I don't do anymore. And they aren't commenting on anything. They're not enhancing my experience on there. So it'd be nice to not have to deal with them. Awesome, man. Where can people find you?
Basically just Brian Atkins Photography on my Instagram, and that's also my website as well. Those are pretty much the two platforms. And then I've got YouTube as well, which is also just Brian Atkins Photography. And then Threads, obviously, and you can get to that through my Instagram page. So anyone that wants to reach out to me, I always encourage people to DM me if anyone's got questions on anything we talked about or whatever they see on my feed or locations in Oregon or cameras, whatever it might be.
But man, it's been awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me.